So it is the 7th, and we're talking about bacteria, and we're talking about this, because we're trying to answer the question. We've answered the question, what are bacteria? We've started to answer the question, how do antibiotics work? How much of that do you think you can answer? How do antibiotics work? Well, by killing bacteria. What do they need to do to kill bacteria? Well, that's the immune system. Be careful. Be careful. So that chemical antibiotic.
Get rid of what's not supposed to be.
How does a chemical antibiotic know the difference? They have to somehow attack the things bacteria have to do to survive, right?
Attack things that are different.
Well, if they can determine what's different. If the chemical is smart enough to only target things that are different. You're both thinking of the immune system rather than antibiotics, I think. Okay, so then what is antibiotic resistance? Talk to one another. Again.
It's a little card that bacteria.
What's antibiotic resistance? So they don't die when they encounter an antibiotic. That's antibiotic resistance. And now what we're working on this. What factors cause that resistance? So we said it's natural selection. We kind of gave the answer ahead, but we got to figure out how that works. So we said all populations have natural variation. And I've got my beautiful little bacteria right there. And we're not really interested in one individual bacteria. What we're really interested in, and if you've got dosseri that you're using to do this, this is a great time to start doing some copying. Copy, paste, paste, paste. Because I'm going to draw a whole population of bacteria. Yes, I am. And I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to paste it right there. Amazing things are going to happen here. Because we can just keep making this into a larger and larger and larger population. We could do this all day long. Copy, paste, paste. Kind of would make nice wallpaper, don't you think? Paste. Okay, I'll stop there for now. So what makes these bacteria look the way they do? You said inheritance. What are they inheriting? They're genes. What are genes? It's not what you wear. When we say you inherited a gene, what are we talking about?
You get from your parents.
You get it from your parents. Well, a trait is caused by a gene in some cases, but they're not the same thing. Precision of language.
What's in your DNA?
Oh. A gene is actually a piece of DNA. So DNA is like a book. And a gene is a single page out of that book. Yeah. Your DNA is made up of a whole bunch of genes. And those genes control the characteristics that we see in an organism. So they control your curly hair or your blonde hair or your straight hair or your dark hair. They control the color of your eyes, but they also control things like the chemistry of your brain. They control things like whether or not you make enough digestive enzymes to break down your food. Some people don't. Some people have to take extra enzymes to break down their food. They control whether the little flap at the top of your stomach works well enough to keep acid from coming back up your throat. They control a whole lot of risk factors for disease. They control a bunch of things. Well, in these bacteria, we could look down to the level of their genes, and we might, if we looked all the way down to the level of their genes, we might just find one that had just a little difference in its DNA. Huh, look at that. That one appears to have a little chunk of its DNA that's a little bit different. Well, that's interesting. And, that little bit of difference in the DNA could do a whole lot of things. Could do a whole lot of things. And we might find another one over here that has another little section, whoops, a little section of DNA that's just a little bit different. And that little section of DNA might maybe mean it only has one flagella. So we might see little differences in bacteria, and they might be due to differences in their DNA. Interesting. Interesting. Well, as a matter of fact, that's some nice bacterial wallpaper. We got a few that are a little bit different, but that's okay. Different's okay. Which of these things is not like the other? Yeah, we already played that game. That all populations have natural variation. I'll read this, then I'll shut up for a little bit while you copy, and then we'll talk. So all populations have natural variation. Variation can happen as a result of mistakes in copying DNA. We call those mutations. Some mutations have no effect on an organism. Some mutations have a negative effect on an organism, sometimes fatal. Some mutations have a positive effect on an organism. They make it bigger, better, stronger, faster. And in bacteria, variations can include differences in the thickness of a cell wall, differences in the chemical makeup of a cell wall, differences in the speed of reproduction, differences in how well a bacteria hides from attackers. Have you ever had to copy notes off a friend because you missed a day? Or copy a letter or copy anything? Sometimes when you're copying something, you make a mistake. And sometimes when a cell is copying DNA, it makes a mistake. We call it a mutation. And it is possible for a mutation to have no effect. It's possible for a mutation to not do anything or change anything. It's possible. When we do protein synthesis, you'll actually see how it's possible. It's possible for a mutation to have a negative effect, to do something that harms the living thing. But it's also possible for the mutation to have a positive effect, to help it, to make it better, stronger, faster, tougher, more able to survive. So there are lots of variations we could see in humans or trees or dandelions or anything else. In bacteria, I mean, they're pretty simple. There aren't a whole lot of moving parts here. So there aren't a whole lot of variations here. The big ones that we see are differences in the thickness of the cell wall. Now, is that always good? What if the cell wall was thinner? Then it wouldn't be as tough. That would be a negative mutation from the perspective of the bacteria. We could see a different chemical makeup of the cell. Maybe that protein cell wall around it is a slightly different protein.
So that's how bacteria are antibiotic resistant, because some mutations make it tougher.
Oh. Well, but if one bacteria is tougher, who cares?
Bacteria multiplies.
They do. They do. So they can also change, you're like 3 steps ahead, you're good. They can also have a mutation that changes how fast they reproduce. Do you guys know what tuberculosis, that's not my phone, right? Do you know what tuberculosis is?
Disease.
It's a disease of the lungs. It's a bacterial infection of the lungs. And
It's not your phone.
I know, but it sounds like it is, doesn't it? I mean, I know it's not. It's a bacterial infection of the lungs, and here's the weird part. Now, okay, prior to antibiotics, there was no way to treat tuberculosis. If you got tuberculosis, you were going to die, and it was a slow death, and it was an ugly death, and you died coughing up chunks of blood. Yahoo! Aren't you glad you had me after lunch rather than before? With the advent of antibiotics, we were able to treat tuberculosis, and it became curable. But it didn't stay curable. So there's a weird thing about the tuberculosis bacteria. It reproduces really, really, really slowly. It takes them a long time to reproduce, which you would think would make it easier to treat, wouldn't you? But in fact, it doesn't. So sometimes reproducing slowly is an advantage, and that allows the bacteria to survive better. Some bacteria speed up their reproductive cycle. They can have more babies in the same period of time, and that makes them tougher to fight back. But any of these changes just add variation. Are they necessarily good? Are they necessarily bad? No. They're just changes. Not necessarily good, not necessarily bad, just changes. I say the odds are against you, and it's amazing that you made it this far because of our next point. The environment presents challenges to survival. Life is tough. So this is the next slide. I'll read it, and then you can copy it, and then we'll talk a little bit. The environment presents challenges to survival and reproduction. For bacteria, these can include drying out. They got to stay wet. Getting too hot or cold. They must maintain correct temperature in order to keep functioning, to reproduce, and to stay alive. Remember, they have to maintain that stable set of conditions, homeostasis. Challenges include being attacked by the body of a host. You're talking all about the immune system. Yeah, your body is constantly attacking these poor little innocent bacteria. Being attacked by larger organisms around them, and being killed by chemicals in the environment. So the environment is rough. The environment's practically trying to kill everything every single second. It's tough. And for bacteria, they could be doing a perfectly fine job of surviving on a cutting board when some evil human salts it and makes bacterial jerky out of them. They could be lingering happily, minding their own business in a piece of raw hamburger when some cruel beast heats it up to 165 degrees and kills them. It's terrible. They could be putzing along the mucous membranes of someone's mouth when a big old macrophage, and you guys don't do immune cells anyplace. These are these big white blood cells that literally eat everything that's in their path, comes and eats them. This is happening in your body right now. It's kind of cool. They could actually be hunted by a predator in their environment. Did you know that there were things that were predators on bacteria? People find this weird. If we went out in that pond, there are little life forms like amoeba and euglena that actually hunt bacteria. They're microscopic and their prey is microscopic. It's like microscopic coyotes eating microscopic rabbits happening in the pond, in the water. It's kind of weird. But for bacteria, there's also this other risk. They could end up in an environment where somebody dumps a toxic chemical in designed to kill them. You wouldn't do that to poor innocent bacteria, would you? I would. I'm probably going to have to by next week if this doesn't clear up. That's antibiotics. That's what we're doing, is we're putting a toxic chemical into our body system that is designed specifically to target those bacteria and kill them. Cruel. Totally justified, though. So now here's what we're going to do. And this is perfect because we have pairs at each desk with missing a few people. So between the two of you at each little island, and at the end of the 9 weeks we will move desks. You'll have the chance to shuffle things up. We'll do a self-shuffle and then I'll reshuffle. So at each island, what I want you to do is together summarize these 2 points and predict how those 2 things combine to cause increasing antibiotic resistance. How do those 2 things cause antibiotic resistance. Okay? So I'm going to set a timer for 4 minutes. You'll have 4 minutes to explain it to one another. And the key is you both have to fully understand it. So if you don't think your partner's really getting it, you have to make them get what you're saying. And if they're saying something that's different, you actually have to come to consensus.